So let's call the Wednesday, April 17th regular meeting of the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission to order at 6 o'clock. And again, we welcome the two visitors from Wyndham Regional Planning Commission and Lamoille County Regional Planning Commission. So thank you. Any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Item 2.
Chris,
go ahead.
sorry. Can we move the minutes off the consent agenda?
More than happy to, Mike. So we're going to move the minutes off the consent agenda. Let's put that at 3.5, right after the consent agenda. Fair enough?
Oh, good. I was going to say the same thing.
Okay, well, thank you. I didn't pause long enough to give everybody the chance. So item 2 on our agenda, please. Public comment for items that are not on our agenda. Anyone here from the public would like to comment?
And Chris, I'm seeing maybe someone from the public plugging in here. Abel? Yeah. Abel Ross. I don't know if that's Russ Abel.
Abel Russ, you got it.
Yeah. Oh, you're from St. George.
I am.
St. George.
Oh, sorry, I apologize.
Well, welcome, Abel.
Thanks.
We're going to move on then. If there are no public comment here at item 2, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. And the first
Chair,
one,
I'd move approval of the consent agenda.
all right, that would be the tip amendment, MPO
Second.
action only. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Jeff. So all those in favor, please say aye. Again, municipalities only.
Aye.
All raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed
Aye.
or abstaining, please speak up. Thank you. Let's move on to 3.5, the minutes of the March 20th board meeting that we've moved from off the consent agenda. Need a motion to approve, perhaps with edits. Catherine?
Well, yeah, given who else made the motion, I'm sure it's because of his name. But but on line 66, Milton were noted as absent during the MPO vote, but Milton and St. George were both present as attendees.
Okay. And Milton would be, was that Michael? And then St. George would
Chuck Wilton.
Chuck
is-
Wilton. Did they arrive late potentially?
Well, they were listed as an attendee, but they were not listed for the MPO vote. They were listed as absent in the MPO vote.
Okay,
Yeah, they we just had a copy paste issue.
all right. And then our representative from St. George, remind me again of your pronunciation, Abel. Did I get it right? Unmute, please.
Abel Russ, sorry.
Abel, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'll get it correct. I have the same problem with Axl Rose and Axel. So thank you, Abel. All right, so moving back to the minutes of March 20th, was that a motion on your part to move the motion to move the minutes with those edits, Catherine?
Sure.
Thank you for line 66 only. And was there a second from Mike O'Brien?
Or Jeff?
Yeah,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I just have a comment, not a suggestion for editing the minutes.
ahead.
But I just wanted to note that between line 150 and 158, there is no mention of the fact that I recommended that we reach out to Wake Robin as part of the outreach.
Mhm.
And I don't need to adjust the minutes. I just want to make sure that that hasn't fallen through the cracks because that didn't appear in the minutes.
I see. Maybe if you'd given us the phone number, we would have been able to.
Well, I don't know it off the top of my head.
No, I know. Thank you.
Starts
Alright.
with 985.
Very good. Mike, go ahead.
No, it starts with 802, Garrett. Then it goes to 985.
Nowadays it does. Go ahead, Michael O'Brien.
Okay, so line 137. So
Yeah.
in the meeting, I asked, Taylor had mentioned there were two themes. and Ann Nelson 4. And so my question was, I asked if there were 2 or 4 themes. And then I also suggested that the title of one of the themes, instead of climate change, just be climate.
Lends to a better climate overall. Yes, I do recall that. And you were asking about the difference between the 4 and the 2. Did you get that, Amy? I didn't. Is
That's
Amy
good
on?
old AI.
All right.
Mhm.
Are you good with that, Amy?
I got it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
That wasn't really AI. That was more AIW.
Doesn't matter.
Other changes, discussion on the minutes. Okay, so Catherine making the motion with edits and Michael making the motion with seconding the motion with edits. Is that correct, Michael? Yes, I'll take that as a yes. Then all those in favor, please say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. And anyone opposed or abstaining, please speak up.
Abstain.
Thank you, Brad Holden.
Brad
All right.
Holden abstain, yes.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, let's move
I
on.
abstain as well. Just making
And
sure.
that's Andy Watts of Williston. Thank you, Andy Watts of Williston. So 2 abstentions. Let's move on to item 4, Vtrans carbon reduction strategy and greenhouse gas performance targets. Who takes the lead on this here?
I can introduce this one. You should have it's kind of a combined information and action item, if you will. We have Andrea right here from Vtrans, who's going to talk about their carbon reduction strategy, which Melanie and I and Eleni helped participate in, and the greenhouse gas performance target. This is similar to the FHWA performance targets for safety that I believe Eleni and Sai have been before this board to talk about before, and we are seeking approval of those. And again, there's a memo in the packet with a suggested motion. But without further ado, I will pass it over to Andrea to walk us through this.
Great. Thanks, Jason. I'll share my screen. You all are seeing that now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So, let me move this. If anything comes up, just let me know, Jason or somebody else, because I've hidden you all so I can see my screen. So thanks. My name is Andrea Wright. I'm the Environmental Policy Manager at Vtrans. Thanks for having me here to talk about some of the climate work that Vtrans is doing, sort of coming from the federal level, going through the state, and then also impacting the local level. I'm leading a new group at the agency. It's in the planning division. It's called the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Program. And right now, primarily, we do kind of oversee all types of environmental policy, but right now we're really focusing on climate mitigation and adaptation. And that's because we're looking to implement the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, carbon reduction program, which I'm going to talk about tonight, but also the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI, as you might hear it referred to, and then the PROTECT program, which is also an acronym, but it's too long, so I'm just going to say it's about resilience. So we're looking to implement those funds and working with a lot of different entities to be able to do that. And in that capacity, we've been working a lot, like Jason said, with him and with Melanie and Eleni, really over the last couple of years on several different initiatives, but in particular with some participation on our technical committee and our advisory committee for the carbon reduction strategy. They participated in those committees, and then also more recently on the FHWA performance measure. Having trouble. Sorry, I'm having a little computer difficulty here. It's just not fitting. Okay. So I will start with the carbon reduction strategy. There's a link there to it. You can just Google Vtrans carbon reduction strategy. If you find after my presentation you want to dig in a little deeper, there's a lot of analysis that went into it, and there's some explanation about how we did that, and different parts and different pieces and different input that we received from our engagement activities, and that is all in the carbon reduction strategy. So I just wanted to provide that link. So a real quick background on the carbon reduction program. It's part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the carbon reduction program, and Vtrans will receive just over $32 million, and that's to invest in projects and programs that reduce carbon emissions, and then also to aid us in developing a carbon reduction strategy for implementing those funds. And so this list just shows different types of projects and programs that the guidance allows for. We're really looking at reducing traffic congestion, single occupancy vehicle trips. We're looking at fleet electrification and the related infrastructure for that. Really, any project or program that we implement that can work to achieve reduced carbon emissions. And then sort of tangential to this, but definitely included, and I wanted to mention it, is because our carbon reduction strategy sort of looked at it differently than some other states did, recognizing that our programs are only going to get us so far, and that we have other requirements in the state that require more than we can do through our programs. We looked beyond what the agency could do and worked with our stakeholders and other state agencies, and looked at other actions and strategies, policies, regulations that might be implemented to help us reach our requirements under the Global Warming Solutions Act. So the development of the carbon reduction strategy was conducted with two primary objectives. The first was to support the requirements for the greenhouse gas emissions reduction as laid out in the Global Warming Solutions Act. That's Act 153 of 2020, which created legally binding emission requirements for the state as a whole. The Global Warming Solutions Act also required the creation of a climate action plan and a Vermont Climate Council. And one of the first things the Climate Council did was recommend sectoral proportionality. So because the transportation sector made up 40% of the emissions, we were responsible for 40% of the reductions, and that's what a lot of our analysis was based on. And then the second objective, again, going back to the federal requirements for each state to develop a carbon reduction strategy, and we wanted to do that to describe how we were going to hopefully most cost effectively implement the carbon reduction program funds. So the approach that we took for this work involved two phases. The first was to develop a methodology for evaluating the effect of the agency's capital program on greenhouse gas emissions. So based on what we had in place as our capital program, how that would impact. Would it make emissions go up? Would it reduce them? And then the second is to develop that strategy to recommend programs, projects, and different policies that would help us meet the requirements. So I just included this slide really just to point out that the whole process was really, we tried to be inclusive. We had 6 different stakeholders that we met with. We had a couple of different public meetings. We had a public survey. Again, we had a technical committee and advisory committee, which Jason and Melanie and Eleni were part of. So it was a really inclusive process. It took about 1.5 years to develop, and we submitted our carbon reduction strategy to Federal Highway on time in November, and they reviewed it and they have approved it. So the technical analysis that we did to support the strategy included the following elements. We first developed a baseline forecast. We wanted to understand where we were starting from, and then looking at, based on what we have in place now, where we would be for those target years of 2025, 2030, and 2050. We then did an assessment of, like I said, the greenhouse gas impacts of AOT's current capital program. And then we did a gap analysis. So recognizing what those two first things got us, and then looking at where we needed to be what was the gap in there, and then finally looking at and developing and evaluating the strategies that would possibly close that gap. So our first step again was to understand our starting point, so creating that baseline. So we use data and assumptions about factors like the vehicle miles traveled and types of vehicles, the fuel efficiency of different vehicles, the rates of zero emission vehicle adoption that we were going to be expecting, and we developed this baseline forecast. So this forecast estimated, you can see 2.9 million metric tons of carbon emissions emitted by the transportation sector in 2022. And that was projected to decline to 2.4 million metric tons by 2030 and under 800,000 metric tons in 2050. And really the key takeaway from this slide is that the vast majority of emissions in the transportation sector are from motor vehicles, cars and trucks on our roadways. That's shown in that first line there. And the decline that we see in that line item is really due to a transition to zero emission vehicles. And this is really in large part due to recent adopted state rules to accelerate the adoption of zero emission cars and trucks. It's called the Advanced Clean Cars 2 and Advanced Clean Truck rules. And these are requirements for auto manufacturers to bring more zero emission vehicles to Vermont. And then the Agency of Transportation has been implementing several different incentive programs to help foster that adoption, and we'll hopefully continue to do so with funding if we have it into the future so that we can realize these projections. So then the next step, as I said, was moving into evaluating our capital program. So we looked at, there's a list of the different types of programs that we had and sort of a project count within those categories. We were looking at agency-generated emissions, so from construction, maintenance, and operation of our assets. Looking also at clean technology, what we were projecting for transition of our own fleet, and the charging infrastructure that went along with that. Looking at changes in system users, what we called system users, and so that was kind of like mode shift projects, including bike ped, expanded transit, and those types of projects and programs, and then looking at operational efficiency improvements, and that would be something like a roundabout or signal retiming that we could get from our program. And really the conclusion that we see here is that our current capital projects really have a small impact, reducing total transportation emissions really only by about 0.1% or less. So for 2025, we're showing the 2,600 metric tons, and that is versus the overall 2.7 million metric tons that were forecasted from the baseline. And that's the same sort of trajectory for both 2030 and 2050. And then the other thing to realize looking at this is that as more vehicles electrify in the future, those programs and projects that reduce VMT are going to have even less of an impact. So then we looked at the overall forecasted emissions and taking into account that minor impact from our capital program, comparing it to the requirements, we have a gap. So comparing projected with required emission levels, it looks like from our modeling, we are on target to meet the 2025 emissions. Again, that is largely because of the transition to zero emission vehicles, because of the adopted rules by ANR and the other programs that help to incentivize people to move in that direction. But we're looking at a really fairly significant gap in 2030 as well as in 2050. So then we looked at available options to close the gap, and we went out to the public and we got input and our stakeholders, and we got input from them. Basically looking at expanding the projects that we have direct control over at Vtrans, looking at the bike ped type of projects, transit, looking at our EV incentives programs and charging infrastructure, and then looking at other strategies that might be better led by other entities and state partners and even private entities. So things like supporting incentives to encourage compact land use and teletravel. And then also, again, looking at what other policies, incentives, or regulations could be implemented to meet the requirements. And so based on the stakeholder input and public input that we received, we put in a bunch of different parameters and assumptions and modeled those strategies. And then what we see is that with all in everything that we could model, and we could close the gap by about 18%, but we still have a gap. So the CRS, I should say that there's quite a bit of detail in our carbon reduction strategy on that analysis and those parameters that went into modeling the different strategies that we could implement. So there's, yeah, like I said, there's just a lot of detail and factoring in considerations and the things that we heard from the public. But the last part of the carbon reduction strategy really closes out by making recommendations for spending. And this shows the different types of projects and programs that we proposed for use of the carbon reduction program funds, basing that on relative cost effectiveness of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also recognizing that some of those they're not going to be huge reductions. We talked about how small our programs are. So also looking at other co-benefits, looking at equity and looking at accessibility and other health impacts. And factoring those in. Also, the support that we got from the stakeholders and the public, alignment with the climate action plan and our long range transportation plan, and also the ability to implement the funds, at least some of them, immediately, and how that factored in with our opportunities for current programs. So that is our carbon reduction strategy overview. I can take some questions on that, or I can just move into the.
Let me offer a quick one before we get to BARD, but the 4% decrease for the 3-year period, do we get an interim number of how we're doing now, Andrea?
The 4% will come in. I'll definitely talk about that. That's the second part of my talk.
Okay, all right, then
So
I'll withhold
let's go back to that.
that.
If you still have the question after, which you might, we can come back to that.
And then similarly, here we are in 2024. Would this or could this have been set in 2022? Although they're using 2022 as the benchmark, correct? Why the?
Yeah, we use the 2022 as a benchmark for our carbon reduction strategy, and that's also what Federal Highway is requiring for the performance measure also.
And it will go through the end of the calendar year 25?
Yes.
Okay, I'll get to BARD and then we'll go to Garrett. We can't hear you, Bard.
Mm-mm.
Still not getting you. Maybe you can type it in the chat and we can have Garrett. Garrett, you have a question?
Well, first I better unmute. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I actually have a question and then a comment. The question is with the pretty large amount of electrification of vehicles that we're looking at doing, and I'm not objecting to that. But has there been any coordination with the power providers and making sure that there will be the electricity available to do that? I'll let you answer that and then toss out my thought.
there has been, and they seem pretty confident that they can handle that. I mean, if you're talking about resiliency, then there's that issue too. If the lines go down, then more people will have more troubles than they have now if they can't get to where they need to be. So depending on the types of emergencies that you're looking at, that could be an issue. But as far as grid capacity, people are saying that we are good for at least a while. So it's not an immediate concern. And really, I know we heard a lot from the public about not throwing all our eggs in one basket, but it really is the sort of the quickest thing that we can expect the biggest results from. It would be great if we could, and we are in many different ways in throughout the state and a lot of different policies working towards land use changes that will help promote more transit and different mode shifts. But for the time being, those are sort of slower moving and will take more time to realize the benefits from. So for now, vehicle electrification is sort of the big thing.
Should I read your question for you, Bard?
That'd be
Bard's
helpful.
question was, what will the impact of electric generation be, i.e. offsets of increases in CO2 emissions from electric generation?
Yeah.
In other words, are we just moving the pollution?
Right. What we did here with the carbon reduction strategy was not a life cycle analysis. So that is a good point. And I can't answer the question specifically, but I can say that our electric portfolio in Vermont is a lot cleaner than a lot of other states. And throughout the nation, we have a lot cleaner electricity than we do transportation for sure.
And if I could toss out my thought, understand this is coming from an aging hippie. I did hundreds of thousands of miles hitchhiking in my youth. And I've often wondered, I mean, I understand the issue with hitchhiking nowadays is safety and all that. Totally get it. I used to get ticked off at my mom for picking up hitchhikers who said she did it because people were picking me up and she had to return the favor. But I wondered if anybody has ever looked at a sort of a program of getting pre-approved. I'm a safe guy for picking up and maybe even having places where people can pick up passengers to, when they're traveling somewhere. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody, but if oftentimes people are traveling like for work from here to White River or something, being able to take somebody along on that ride, well, then your pollution per mile is cut in half.
Yeah, and we do have some programs. I wouldn't call it a hitchhiking program, but on our Go Vermont webpage, and it's all about ride sharing and van pooling and carpooling and the park and rides. So trying to get to reduce those single occupancy vehicle trips. So there are some sort of informal, or actually even I will say formal, because you can kind of sign up and say, I live in Waterbury and I work in Barre, and are there other people out there who are doing that? And let's carpool. So sort of.
For sure. I was thinking of a more ad hoc sort of situation, the way hitchhiking once was. Because, a lot of things come up where, okay, I need to get to Brattleboro or whatever, but I didn't know it until, 10 o'clock last night kind of thing. And just an idea for maybe coming up with a way of helping a little bit more.
Yeah, there's definitely,
and a fun way to
ride-hailing.
meet new people.
I definitely could be, definitely. Ride-hailing programs exist, but sometimes those can create more GHGs because they're making potentially an extra trip.
Thank you.
Great. So you had the other piece, which might answer my question.
Maybe it will answer your question. Let's go check it out. Okay, yeah, so the greenhouse gas performance measure in December of 2023, Federal Highway published a final rule, and it established this greenhouse gas performance measure. It's part of the transportation performance management system. Jason mentioned the safety one, there's many different measures, and this final rule applies to all state DOTs and MPOs. So again, it's part of the Federal Highway Transportation Performance Management System, which has 17 other performance measures. So it's a new measure. It's added into the system performance section. You can see highlighted there in red. But it doesn't change anything, any of the other measures. It doesn't change the reporting. It was sort of slotted into the regular cadence of reporting that is required under all the other performance measures. The system operates on a 4-year cycle. So every 4 years, state DOTs and MPOs establish both 2- and 4-year targets for each measure, and then they report in every other October on those targets and their performance towards those. So this is the measure, actually starting with the metric. It's the annual tailpipe carbon emissions on the National Highway System. And that's used to calculate the measure, which is the % change in tailpipe carbon emissions on the National Highway System compared to the reference year, which is calendar year 2022. And this measure is what states and MPOs will report to Federal Highway and measure their ability to meet their target. Again, the rule requires states to set targets for 2025, and that has to be declining from that reference year of 2022. So to calculate the metric, again, that's the annual tailpipe emissions. We're looking at a pretty simple formula. It's gallons of fuel consumed by a carbon factor for those fuels, and then the proportion of vehicle miles traveled that occurs on the NHS, and that gives us the tailpipe carbon emissions on the NHS, which is the measure. So Federal Highway has been pretty prescribed on this. They had a lot of input on what the measure should be based on, and they really wanted to try to keep it as simple and consistent across states as possible. So they're using data that already is provided and available. So then again, for calculating the measure, it's just the % change in tailpipe emissions. We're looking at the tailpipe emissions from on the NHS from the current year or the evaluation year and comparing that to the baseline year, which is 2022. So there was a bit of a phase in. I mentioned that 4-year cycle, that we're sort of in the middle of a 4-year cycle. Since this is new and we're in that, they required states to set initial targets for measures by February 1st, and then the MPOs had 180 days after the state submitted their target to submit their own. And they could either adopt the state target or they could come up with their own. So this is the data required for the submittal of the initial target. For our 2022 metric, we have gallons of fuel from, it's called the FASH system. So this is reported already. Then vehicle miles traveled overall, and then on the NHS, and then applying, the next step. I didn't list the CO2 factors, but FHWA provides those factors, and we just calculate our total emissions in million metric tons. So for our target for the 2025, if we recall back to the evaluation of the baseline emissions, the table I showed in an earlier slide, for the CRS, we look at the on-road emissions from the reference year. I think in the table we had on-road emissions, we had from rail, we had from our transit and different places, but because this is the NHS, we're looking at those on-road emissions. So you'll notice, this is a little bit funky. These are different. This 2022 2.6 million metric tons is quite different from 1.071. And that's just a difference in the methodology. Like I said, Federal Highway provided a very simple formula. What we had to work with and was based on a much more complex system with understanding the makeup of our fleet and the vehicle efficiencies of those fleets. And so more went into our baseline emissions and our projected forecast for 2025, but that's what we have to work with. And so we could use that to calculate our reduction. And so just looking at the table with what we modeled, we have a 3.9% reduction. And then again, if you recall the different modeling that we did, we had just that baseline with where we're at with no other programs, policies, projects. And then we had a baseline with the capital program reductions. Remember the 0.1%. And then we had baseline with the capital program as well as carbon reduction strategies, and that could get us a greater percentage. We have decided to go middle of the road with a 4% reduction. So that's the target that we set. And so that's where we are. I did want to mention that, we just went through this whole thing. Originally, the rule required us to submit our targets by February 1st of 2024. In sort of the time between when they announced the rule in December and that first initial target, there was some challenges, some court challenges. And so FHWA said, okay, these proceedings should be done by the end of March. We'll give you until that time frame without penalty to submit your target. And then a couple of weeks ago, at the end of March, a U.S. District Court made a ruling that vacated the Federal Highway Rule for several different reasons. But basically, given that ruling, we've learned from FHWA that states and MPOs do not have to submit targets in reports going forward. That's where things stand now. It's my understanding that that could also change again. So we've submitted our target. We have other requirements through the Global Warming Solutions Act that these targets, that 4% aligns with. So we're keeping that target. And I just wanted to make sure that you all had that context in making your decision here. And I'll take any questions on it too.
Folks, anyone have a follow-ups for Andrea? If not, we're
Chris, can you see Jeff has a hand up?
Go ahead, Jeff. I did not see Jeff. Go ahead.
Hi, Andrea. Thanks for the description. Am I correct in understanding that even in our different number base that we still use fuel sales as one of the drivers in the model?
Yes.
Is that fuel sales on the wholesale level where we collect the gas tax?
I think so. I'm not positive. That's the greenhouse gas inventory. Maureen, I'm not. I wouldn't.
And I was wondering if you did anything to deal with change in inventories related to those sales, because we find that, in gas tax revenue forecasting, inventories can really swing things because they build inventory. They try to build inventories when prices are low, and then they work down inventories when prices are high. So I was just wondering if that could be significant enough to affect one of the determinants in our emissions, because they're formulaic emissions calculations, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And we put in some trend adjusters for increase in, the technologies of the vehicles and all that kind of stuff, I assume, over time.
Yes.
So there must be some vehicle stock factor
there is
in it as well. Okay.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
is there anything that's explicitly looks at change in
So,
inventories?
I mean, I'll say that for what we did with the carbon reduction strategy, that was all in there because it was based on the LEAP modeling and a lot of different other factors. And but I don't think you would say that for the federal highway measure because it's very basic. It's fuel sales.
So leaf modeling has the capacity to do that, and we put some things in there, or did we not?
The LEAP modeling does.
If Jason, if you have just a description or some technical documentation on that, I'd like to see it. If I could. But we don't need to hold up people now.
Yeah, I think we can get a hold of that for sure.
Okay, anyone else have questions? If not, we're being asked to have a resolution to accept Vtrans GHG target of -4% for 2022 to 2025 period and support staff in their efforts to contribute to the accomplishment of this target. Can I get that motion, please? Thank you, and I apologize.
Chris, I'll make the motion, but I did have a question too.
Go ahead, Mike. I'm busy having a leg cramp, so I'm going to sign off here for a second with the mute.
Andrea, I'm sorry, I might have missed this, and I probably should know the answer, but the goal is just for FHS. Did I say that right? Federal Highway System roads,
And the National Highway System.
National Highway System, and
Yeah.
interstate highways. Does it also include other roads, U.S. roads?
Someone's going to have to help me out with that.
Yeah, I can cover that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it does include other roads. Off the top of my head, I believe it includes part of 117, part of 289, US 7 through Chittenden County. I can link to our ECOS map where you can see the map of the National Highway System. But it does include more than just the interstate, but it's basically a subset of roads that is just critical to movement of freight, goods, security, resiliency, evacuation routes, that sort of thing.
Wouldn't it cover US highways like Route 2 and Route 7? Those are national.
Yeah.
Some US highways, but not necessarily all of them.
Really? Okay.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
And Bard, we still can't hear you. Sorry. So I'm seeing Chris had to step away. Bard, I'll try to help out a little bit and facilitate here until Chris can come back. I think there's a motion on the table from Mike. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
This
Okay,
is an
Jackie?
MPO vote, is it not?
That is true. It's an MPO action. Jackie got your second. Yeah, so just for clarifications, municipality except for Buell's Gore, sorry, Garrett, and Vtrans get to vote on this.
Well, then I should remove my second because I'm not MPO.
Yeah, okay, Miles.
So I rescind my second.
Yeah,
I second.
yeah, I got the second from Jackie already. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
So any more questions or discussion? All right, so it sounds like you're ready for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. And any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Thank you all for that. And thank you, Andrea, for visiting with us and explaining all that. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks,
You too.
Andrea.
Thank you.
All right, I'm back.
Excellent, Chris.
I overdid my gardening. I apologize. Going from all the squatting, stooping, and then sitting down for this period is just threw me for a loop. So did we pass our resolution on the motion? Thank you.
All
Appreciate
set.
it. All right.
Ready to adjourn, Chris?
I'm ready to get back to my garden and put the peas in. You know how it is. You got to get those peas into the ground before April. 19th. I think I made it. All right, so item 5, the draft fiscal year 2025 UPWP program and budget. We need to warn a public hearing. Will that be for next month's May 15th, Charlie?
Yeah, May 15th at 6 p.m. For the UPWP, FY25 UPWP and budget.
Do we need a motion for that?
Yes, please.
All
I'll
right,
move. This
Thank
is
you.
Garrett.
Thank you, Garrett. And a second? Thank you, Jackie. All those in favor, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining, please speak up. Item 6, draft fiscal year 2025 UPWP program and budget review.
And now in retrospect, I'm wondering if we did these actions in or these items in reverse, and we should have discussed it first. But nonetheless, here we are. We need a public hearing next month, so thank you for that vote. There's a memo in your packet that gives a little bit of background, and I think Marshall, am I turning it over to you?
Yeah, that sounds good, Charlie. I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen for a brief overview presentation. All right, can folks see that?
Yes.
Awesome. So, yeah, good evening, everyone. So I'm Marshall Distal, transportation planner with CCRPC. And, one of my roles involves coordinating the development of our Unified Planning Work Program, also known as the UPWP. So before we, go ahead and discuss the entire work program and the budget, just kind of wanted to give folks an overview of the FY25 process, as well as a breakdown of the just the transportation funding over the past handful of years. So here's just a quick refresher on the UPWP. CCRPC develops this annually, and it serves as our work plan for all of our local and regional transportation projects and other planning activities. As an MPO, we are required to put together a UPWP, which essentially, details how all of our funds will be allocated annually, so that the UPWP outlines everything. It outlines all of our numerous programs, identifies the transportation, land use, water quality, and the other planning activities and projects that we work on in collaboration with our municipalities and partner organizations. And there's just sort of a milestone list for FY25 listed there at the bottom of the slide. So as part of the development of the UPWP, we have a committee, and that's made up of representatives there listed on the right. And that committee convenes annually to review all the municipal and partner funding requests. And then after the committee reviews all the projects, we develop a draft UPWP. We present that to the TAC, which we did in April, and we present that to the executive committee, and then we bring that back to the board for final adoption each May. So here is just sort of a look at how our UPWP funds have been allocated from FY19 through FY25 by project category. I've also included a percent breakdown of each project area to the right of each table. So I know there's a lot to process here. It's likely a little overwhelming with all these figures displayed in one slide, but I'm going to make sure and have these sent out with the meeting minutes in case anybody wants to spend just a little extra time looking over these. And also just wanted to clarify, these funding tables are, they're only showing transportation consultant funding that we've allocated to transportation related projects in each of these fiscal years. So land use projects, all of our CCRPC staff time, and all the other non-transportation related funding that's included in each of our overall annual budgets, those would not be included in these tables. And these tables also don't include any budget related adjustments that are made during the mid-year So just to keep things consistent, all the bottom line totals, they're only conveying what's been approved by the UPWP committee at their last third meeting of each of these years. So these tables have been divided into 7 separate categories. Roadway would include projects from everything from traditional scoping and corridor studies, traffic calming projects, intersection studies, bike ped for projects focused on bike ped planning. Water quality, that's including everything from MRGP related projects and other, stormwater inventories and studies. We have TDM, and that's primarily showing the funding that we've dedicated to our partner organizations like CATMA and CarShare. Energy has primarily been for projects around, EVs and transportation energy planning. GMT, that includes all the transit planning funds that we're passing along each year. And then lastly, that other category, that includes, a wide array of projects that don't really fit well within any of the other categories. And that includes everything from equity work, transportation impact fee studies are in there, and just our generic transportation related technical assistance. So if you just, scan the bottom lines over the years there, in FY19 and FY20, we're allocating a little under 1.7 million for consultant funded transportation projects and to GMT. And that has continued to steadily increase up to our proposed 2.66 million for FY25. So we've, definitely experienced quite an increase in the total amount of our UPWP funds that we've been distributing over these past handful of years. So here's just sort of a visual representation of our funding since FY19. I think this sort of graph is pretty effective at showing, that overall funding increase that we've had over the past handful of years. You can see how, the funding has fluctuated for various categories. Like water quality, that's, in the blue, that's varied fairly significantly depending on the year and the requests. Funding for GMT in the green and TDM in the gray, they both have increased a bit. Bike ped, and that's in the red. That's definitely grown the most when you compare that to FY19. I think for FY25, we've allocated about like 4 times the funding for bike ped projects compared to FY19. So it's definitely showing that municipalities have been requesting significantly more funding for active transportation projects over the past few years. And then meanwhile, funding for traditional intersection and corridor studies shown there in the black has remained, fairly stable over the past handful of years as well. So here is a chart kind of displaying a history of awarded funds by municipality. Since FY19, all of our communities in Chittenden County, with the exception of Beals Gore and St. George, have been able to take advantage of our MPO funding through the UPWP. One thing that I think is important to note about this graph is that it's sort of an imperfect representation of all the work that we're doing in the municipalities. Since these bars are only representative of our MPO funding that's going towards, transportation projects being conducted by consultants, this is not showing, our staff time, which we allocate for transportation related data projects, land use planning requests, and all of our other technical assistance projects. And, a lot of our land use and technical assistance projects, those are being conducted in our rural municipalities. But you wouldn't be able to see that in this graph. So we're just, working on some new mapping exercises to better show all of our work throughout the county for future meetings. And another thing I should note about the UPWP funding that's distributed annually, that it is, it's based on the requests that we receive. So you can see some, significant funding fluctuations over the years by certain municipalities. For example, if you take a look at Colchester, like they didn't submit any transportation related UPWP requests in FY24, but then, you know, they're projected to receive close to 200,000 for consultant funded projects in FY25. So it's really, you know, it's all based on the individual municipal requests and the priorities. And we realize there's also some, you know, local match funding constraints that can come into play for certain years as well. Lastly, you know, I should note we've been pretty fortunate to be able to have enough PL transportation funding in each of these fiscal years to, you know, be able to essentially fund all of the eligible UPWP requests that we have received. Here's my last slide, and this is just providing sort of a look at our partner organization funding. We've been partnering with CATMA, Local Motion, CarShare on UPWP projects throughout all these fiscal years. You can see their funding jumped up a bit starting in FY23. I believe this is when we invited them to apply for more funding because we were finding that we were not quite drawing down all of our PL funds that we had allocated to us. So they've been able to take advantage of that. VEIC had taken a break from UPWP funding over a couple of fiscal years because they were sourcing some funds directly from Vtrans. But now in FY25, there's another EV related request that will be conducted by VEIC. Didn't get any new requests from UVM this year, but we are currently finishing up a project with them on the development of a sustainability dashboard. And then Net Zero Vermont, shown there on the far right, they are our newest partner, and we've been working with them on their Walk to Shop initiative over the past couple of years. And that will be continuing into FY25. Anyone have any questions on any of the slides before I stop sharing? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Marshall. So that was kind of some broad context of history. So we have two documents. One there was a separate link to the work program. I am not going to try to share that because it's pretty small type font. I hope you have a big screen or a good Zoom feature on your computer. Would you like us to walk through like the new projects in the work program? Or otherwise I'm more oriented towards looking at the budget, but if you'd like to spend some more time on the work program, happy to do that. This is a draft, and we are still doing some cleanup things and finding maybe some calculation errors or something in there, but we're still working through that. And this will be on your agenda next month for action. I'm not seeing anybody really eager to go through the fine print.
We're through the projects, so we're more interested in the money.
Oh, okay. All right.
Unless somebody feel free to bubble up if you see a project or would like to have more info on a project.
Yeah, and just
similarly in May.
And real quickly in the work program, I'll just kind of note there may be still a little bit of pink in there, which may be projects that we think might be able to be deleted. The light blue are new land use projects. The light green are new transportation projects. And you'll see some yellow in there, which are pending projects. So those are things where we don't have agreements in place yet with typically a state agency, but we think they're likely to come. And then there's also some just red text where we've amended text, maybe added a deliverable or updated a project description. So just that's in the legend on some page. Note to self, we should number the pages in the work program, would make it easier. So, all right, I'm going to move back to the budget then. And the budget, at least in my PDF, starts on page 16 of your packet. would it be easiest if I share, or does everybody have access and following along on your own screens? Oh, Benjamin, I hope you're not trying. Are you trying to look at the budget on your phone?
In which case we better share.
You are.
Yeah,
All right,
let's
I'm going to share.
Thank you.
That tipped me over.
That was giving me the heebie-jeebies.
And sorry, give me 1 second. I'm just expanding your faces. Can everyone see? Okay, you can see it. So some of you have seen this format quite a few times before. Others are newer to our board, so I'm gonna walk through this a little more slowly. And we have grouped our revenue. So these are essentially grant agreements that we have in place, or typically what we have here on this left column. We have them grouped. So the first category here is municipal regional. Our regional planning grant program is the primary largest funder of our land use work. You see this is a bit of an increase from last year. It does look like we're going through the budget process in the legislature now with about a 3% increase, similar to all the state agencies' direction that they got from the governor's office. So that is good. They didn't always think of us that way. So this is a very positive thing that they're thinking of us more like one of the state agencies and trying to give us those kind of cost of living increases each year. So that's at 637,000. And you see, when you see these numbers here on the left side, column F here, it's the draft FY25. These are direct dollars as opposed to money that is going to our staff. So this means, some money for a consultant or some other kind of direct expense. Whenever you see a number, can you see my mouse move there? You can, okay. And then this is a place where you'll start seeing some pink rows. And Forrest, remind me, is there a reason we have the regional planning dollars in bright yellow?
We either A, didn't unyellow it, or we're hedging because the budget coming out of the state isn't completely final yet.
Yeah, okay,
Let's
but
go
I
with
think
option B.
It's pretty accurate, I think.
Okay.
There's some pandemic recovery money here that, that project had ended last fiscal year. Jeff, I try to add some, just at least a few words here of a note in response to your request at the exec committee. And so a few of these other tasks in terms of why they're going down or whatever is just they were completed last fiscal year or maybe before. And yellow, the CUD, so the Communications Union District, I have colored that yellow. Maybe I should be coloring it pink. And I don't see Ann Janda on here, but Ann has been staffing the Chittenden County CUD. When we were working on this a couple weeks ago, we had a similar amount to FY24, like around $50,000 of revenue there. Based on the last CUD board meeting this past week, I would not be surprised. And Brad, I don't know if you want to. You can just nod if what I say is correct, but I would not be surprised if the CUD decides to stop their work and kind of send the money back to the state essentially to do their work. And Brad's on that board, and Andy Watts from Essex is also an alternate on that board. And Brad, Andy, is that fair? I don't want to be overly pessimistic.
Yeah, it's fair to say, Charlie.
Yeah, so
it's been a very challenging, complicated process.
Yeah, and it's really and we could talk some more about that after we get through the budget if somebody has questions. But a lot of restrictions there, and just from a budgeting standpoint, from my perspective, trying to be conservative and not count on money that that may not be coming to us. Any other questions up here in this municipal regional section? I think one other thing I'll call out here is row 7. This is a portion of dues that we probably, given the other ways we're using dues, we collect a $260 something thousand in dues for us.
270.
270 now. And if you actually, I'll transition here to the transportation section. You can see 60,000 here of dues going to match the federal transportation dollars to pay for staff, and another 91,000 of dues going to pay for regional consultants. So yeah, adding that up, we're about 150 plus the 118, very close to the 170 number, or I'm sorry, 270 number that Forrest just mentioned. So that's how the dues are used. Again, mostly matching the transportation funding, but then we do have some left that can go to other types of work. And that is certainly our most flexible funding. MPO work, a big chunk of that goes to the staff, almost 1.9 million. And we're also using some of the regional planning funds, and maybe that's why we had that highlighted bright yellow, was to note there's another $150,000 of regional planning funds that we're using so that we don't have to use all of our dues to match the transportation funds. And that really, financially or from a fiscal perspective, the more we can retain the dues, we have to spend every one of the regional planning dollars each year. So we can put money into the reserve account to protect the municipalities. And we're trying to get to a place where we have 3 months in our reserve account. And that really is just big picture. If things really went to heck and we needed to fold up shop, we were trying to have enough money where we could close out our obligations and make sure that the municipalities did not have any liability from our operations. So that was just some larger perspective there. Transportation funding. The biggest chunk of transportation funding is, again, on this direct side here on the left, this almost $4 million of passing through us, primarily to consultants to work on projects. So that is the estimate that we have right now for FY25. And that's pretty much the money that Marshall was just reviewing with you. Noting that there's carry forward that happens. So he was kind of reviewing like kind of the new money. There's still a bunch of money from FY24 that we're still spending in FY25. So it's always more than the new money. And then the last thing I'll mention here is we have a RAISE grant that we got for, it's called Northwest Vermont Transit-Oriented Development. We're kind of showing the dollars there to pay for consultants as $1 million. As you can tell, that's a very rough estimate. We'll see what it is for FY25. That grant is actually closer to 2 million, and it's over 3 years. We're still fairly early in that length of time. Any questions on the transportation section? Taylor, were you raising your hand? No, okay. Yeah, you can save your questions for tomorrow. The next section here, natural resources and energy. This has a whole wide range of stuff, as you can see by how many rows are here. So brownfields, again, a good chunk of money in that program. We get grants from EPA every few years, goes to the brownfields assessment program, estimating 200,000. There's some state money that, coming through the Agency of Commerce for brownfields also. Again, the majority of that is going to environmental consultants to evaluate brownfields. We have some other projects here that we completed in FY24 that were kind of one-time or one-year grants. And then quite a few things. Well, the Vermont Building Energy Code is a grant that a consulting firm got, I think, Taylor, and they've asked us to kind of be a partner in that work. and looking at building energy codes in Vermont. So, and this is also related to the greenhouse gas or the Global Warming Solutions Act targets in the big picture. And a number of these things are climate resiliency toolkit. This is coming out of the climate action plan, the municipal vulnerability index coming out of the climate action plan. This climate pollution reduction act funding here is some federal funding that the climate action office is applying for. Those last three are colored yellow. We had them colored yellow in January. They're taking longer to go through the system, somewhere between the feds and the state agency. But we think that those projects will land on our plate eventually here. And please stop me or raise your hand if you have any questions as I'm going along here. The RCEP is a regional stormwater program for the MS4 communities. There's $6,000 there of staff time that we spend on that program. We do water quality basin planning with the Agency of Natural Resources. In this particular grant, we're the lead RPC for the whole state. So we retained about 22 grand, and 220 something thousand dollars goes to the other RPCs. So that's passing through us. And then a couple of years ago, you may recall, we became a clean water service provider. And there's a couple grant agreements that we have with the Department of Environmental Conservation. Again, 8,000 here for staff, 10,000 to pass through. And then there's some formula grant dollars that go to staff. They're requiring us to keep a separate accounting of the money that passes through us to do clean water service projects. So there is another chunk of money, but it doesn't, and we've kind of talked to our auditors here, it doesn't really flow through our budget because the state is requiring us to keep that money separate. I think maybe in previous years we've shown it passing through here, but we're trying to get a little bit more accounting correct for our auditors. Forrest, did I explain that mostly correctly?
Yes.
All right, thanks. We're doing a little project to assist Lake Iroquois Recreation District. That is pending right now. And then there's some project development money, again, for water quality projects. This is the Addison County RPC is the lead RPC on that, and they're passing some money through to us. And then we just got a new grant through A&R, the Urban and Community Forestry Block Grant. So there's about 30,000 here for staff time. And then this is a lot of money flowing through us to municipalities around the state. So this is at least 660,000, but it's probably closer to 700,000. I think it stretches over a couple of years. Any questions on all this natural resources work? All right. I figure eventually, thanks, Benjamin. Eventually I'm going to put you to sleep here. So please stop me before your head hits the desk. The last section is emergency management and health. And this is primarily whittled down to 2 grants this coming year. One that we've done every year for quite a while, the Emergency Management Performance Grant, about $60,000 coming staff time. And this is really a time to support emergency preparedness, the Regional Emergency Management Committee, and also training, et cetera, to have our staff supplement the VEM staff in the State Emergency Operations Center. And I don't know how many acronyms I've used so far. Please raise your hand if I've used an acronym you haven't heard. And then the other thing here is there's a small grant that we have from A&R on floodplain mapping. The floodplain maps are being updated right now. Or I say right now, that's in federal timeline. That could be sometime in the next year or 2 or 3. So all told, and again, we kind of split our budget or revenue just to understand. So 3.3 million goes towards kind of the staff office operating expenses. And then 6.2 is passing through us to other entities, primarily consultants and other RPCs and municipalities. So about 9.5 million estimate for FY25 budget. These are a lot bigger numbers than we used to have. So, okay, turning to the expense side, that 6.2 that passes through us is just shown at the top. This is direct project expenses passing through us. Okay, and then we get into really kind of our operating budget. And a few significant things I'll point out here. Our biggest expense by far are salaries and benefits. There's a couple things going on here, and the 17% kind of keeps grabbing my attention here on the benefit line. But the 6.8 on the staff, there's definitely a little bit of increase in salaries for raises, but there's also somewhere between 1 and 2 FTE potentially in here, and we're still kind of playing around with the budget to see what fits and what doesn't fit, and what makes sense to do also organizationally. But we are looking at maybe another person maybe to take the load off a little bit of some of what's going on in our business office and on Elaney and Taylor's plates. I think as we've been working on our compensation study, on our code of conduct, it kind of really bubbled up about how much workload is on those folks. And so we're trying to figure out if we can reduce some of that. So that's potentially an extra staff person to help there. And then the benefits line is so much more. There's a couple factors going in here. One, we always budget conservatively on our health insurance and things like that. So we're always trying to be conservative, but also that means that we're, for the new staff person, we have assuming that they have a family and they're taking family health insurance, and all the other benefits. So we're kind of fully loaded. And we have a couple other staff people that we hired this year that have their full benefits were not in last year's budget. So it's almost two or at least a couple people more of benefits loaded in here. Let me know if you have more questions on that, in which case I'm going to retreat to Forrest. But that's the big piece. The rest of these are kind of organizational expenses, education partnerships section here. We're seeing a little uptick in conference and training now that people are traveling more than they did a couple years ago. So trying to increase that budget a little bit. And also sponsorships and things for programs. We're seeing more requests coming through there also. And also, I think as we're doing more equity work, we're trying to be more thoughtful and have more money about supporting partners in the community, which was something that came out of our organizational assessment around equity and inclusion a year or two ago. You'll note that the EV costs are going down. So we have a organization car, electric vehicle now. We have EV charging here if you haven't been to our office in a while. But we're proposing to acquire the vehicle. We've been leasing it, and so the cost is going down as we depreciate that rather than have it be a monthly lease payment. And other things in our office and general operations, the rent goes up every year a little bit. Just auditors a little bit more, depreciation significantly more. I'll get to that in a little bit. We've got a little breakout for the capital budgeting down below. equipment and furniture a little bit more. And then internal consultants. This is again related to dynamics, in our business office. And also as we're trying to do more with the code of conduct and just our personnel policies we've budgeted some more to have some potential, I'm going to call it fractional HR assistance. So that's why that extra 10,000 there. I just covered a lot of things. I don't know if any of them raised any questions. All right, or I'm lulling you to sleep with the rhythm of my voice. I'll try to talk a little bit more sing-songy if I can. Okay, so a bottom line, this got to a $32,000 excess revenue over expenses. And if that was to play out, that's the kind of money that we would put into our reserve account that I mentioned earlier. On the bottom right-hand side here is a little breakout of our indirect rate and year-end revenues in excess of expenses. Anyway, you can see it's been a few years since we had a negative balance at the end of the year. So that last time that happened was FY19. So this 5-year, I'm not sure if this is I guess it's a 5-year running total from FY19 through FY23, which is the last fiscal year that we've closed the books on. We've been able to grow our reserve account quite a bit over the last few years. We don't know yet how FY24 will turn out. I expect it'll be probably a little closer to 0 than we have been the last 3 years anyway. And we highlighted the indirect rate at 78%. And just to kind of flag that we may not have 78% in this number or in this cell here the next time you see this budget next month. Again, as we're trying to adjust the various variables in our budget, we've been approved for an indirect rate of 81%. Again, depending on if we hire somebody in the business office or something, we may increase that a little bit. The indirect rate has a significant impact on whether we lose money or make money in a given year. But we're also trying to be conservative and not use an indirect rate that will cause us to have swings in our indirect rate. And you can see we've pretty much stopped the swings in the high 70s percentile here. And you can see the last time we had a swing where we had an approved rate of 68, but our actual was 76, we lost $50,000 because we weren't recovering all of our costs. And I can tell you that 68 was because we over recovered, in a previous year. So any questions on indirect rate or kind of
It's been consistent. It's pretty.
Oh, yeah.
Charlie, it might be helpful because this comes up intermittently to briefly define how the indirect rate is calculated or what it represents, because especially for the newer folks, it may be a more foreign term or less.
Yeah, thanks, Bard. You're right. That's I just made a giant assumption there in just diving into the numbers. So for those of you who haven't heard the term indirect rate before, this is a federally, I guess, mandated process in a way. And so there's federal rules about this. And really the concept behind it is that not everything can be charged to a grant as a direct expense. Like when we're working on a grant, like, okay, good, I'm going to charge my hour of time on it. That's great. But then we have things like rent or things like our board meeting where we're talking about things like this that are applicable to all of our grants. or where that expense should be kind of shared across all of our funders. And so that's the indirect rate. It does cover our operating expenses, but also staff time that is spent on things that can't be directly billed to any particular grant. So some of like staff training, some even just staff meetings, or personnel time, commission time, finance, accounting work, developing our work program, kind of gets distributed across all of our funders through the indirect rate. Is that helpful, Bard? And I guess one other thing, so there is a procedure around that has been negotiated with Vtrans. Vtrans is the agency that reviews our indirect rate cost proposals and rates, and approves them each year. They just approved our rate at 81%. Was that this past week for us, I think?
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, that's my 3-minute spin on indirect rates, but is that helpful?
I think so. I'd call out Jeff because I know, Jeff, you've had some interest in this topic over the years. Is there anything you would add to that?
No, okay. Thanks, Jeff. And then
I was trying to find my mute button. I'm on 2 screens.
The last couple things at the bottom of the budget, we've been trying to just add information to just give you a better sense of what's happening. So bottom right here is cash balances as of last week. And again, this can vary depending on, we just paid bills or checks just came in. But we have almost $1 million on hand as of last week. The one thing I'll note here in the middle, that this reserve, we have a money market account that we call our reserve account. This is where we've been trying to get closer to 3 months of operating expenses, or about $750,000. We're a little over $400,000 there now. So that's how much is in that reserve account. I don't know if that begs any questions.
There was a time, folks, where we had no money in a reserve account, and we were living from check to check and those kinds of things. So this is a good situation for the organization to be in terms of executing. There's the right blend between our staff time and the throughput of project work being done by our consultants and our support of our partners and other organizations. So it's not quite as good as it gets, but it's still pretty good. And it will be better for the organization to have 3 months worth of working capital in there in case something happens. We have a lot of people on our staff that are good staff that we need to also protect, as well as, to get their good work done. We want them to feel good about the organization, and we don't want them to have one foot out the door because they're worried about their job.
Amen for that. Yeah, and we've had very, I think, good success at retaining staff. And thanks, Jeff, for pointing that out. And thanks. I should thank all the staff for this also. And the last little note is a capital budgeting note over here. We had a server, the electric car, and we did add some furniture for I think they were called hush pods, but essentially we got like kind of private meeting rooms. Staff has been gravitating more towards the office. Eleni, are you in one right now? Yeah, cool. I was like, oh, what's that background? You're not home. But so if you visit our office, you'll notice that the front of the office looks quite different. We've got 3 of these little meeting pods. And really the issue is just making it easier for staff to participate in online meetings, and also be able to talk and not bother adjacent staff. So, oh, good. I'm glad you're using it, Eleni. Excellent. Any other questions on the budget? We are still just full disclosure, we are still kind of working on this, so it may look a little different come next month for budget for vote. And then for those of you that are new here, and at the top of this column, where was I? At the very top here, note that we're comping to the mid-year FY24 budget. So we approve the beginning of our year, we approve in May for July 1, and then after we get through December, we come back to you in January and ask you to approve a mid-year budget. And really, we're just updating things because things change during the year. Sometimes there are agreements from state agencies that we get asked to enter into during after this time of year, and or something else changes or something got delayed, et cetera. So things are always adjusting, but that's good. So I don't know, any questions? You guys have been so polite and quiet. Chris, back to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Charlie. I appreciate this and thorough, as always, unpacking our acronyms. I'm going to want to add more to 8D on the CUD and find out some of the challenges that our members mentioned. But in the meantime, we're going to move to item 7 and Nelson Stoner for an equity update. Welcome in, Nelson. How are you?
Thanks, Chris. I'm doing well. Nice to see you all. Just a brief update for you all tonight. We've been working on lots of prep for this housing convening that we're hosting tomorrow night. I hope you all will join. We are still deep in updating our regional plan. So Sarah, Darren, Taylor, Emma, a bunch of us are working on community engagement for that. Just over this past weekend, we attended the Vermont Afghan Alliance's Eid celebration, which was really wonderful. Last week, we had a focus group with Nepali speakers. We attended a Somali community dinner, and we have some more upcoming focus groups with mobile home park residents, senior citizens, youth, so on and so forth. So that takes lots of time to kind of foster those relationships, prep materials, talk to folks, follow up, write up notes. The Equity Advisory Committee is still running. So our last meeting, Jason and Eleni came and talked to the group about how transportation planning works. And that was great, brought up lots of wonderful questions and kind of shared information with folks about how that part of our operation functions. I've been deep in a leadership training over the past 7 weeks that I would highly recommend to anybody who's looking for something of the sorts. It was hosted through the Interaction Institute for Social Change. It was a 7-week facilitative leadership course. I'm happy to share content out of that, and I'm hoping to bring some of those resources and some of that content to staff discussions too in the coming months. Code of conduct, we're still digging into that. I'm working with the Community Justice Center on kind of finalizing that document, so that will come your way. And yeah, that's about it. Otherwise, as always, lots of time meeting folks, building relationships, connecting, hearing what others are up to. And yeah, any thoughts, questions?
Folks, anything for Ann Nelson? I know I had a question. Maybe Emma might be more prepared if she's there to fill us in on what the numbers might look like for tomorrow night's housing.
I think we had 82 people
Mm-hmm.
last time I talked to Emma. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, we had 82 as our final number. We've had a few extras, a couple of people drop off, so it's just around 80.
And how does that compare to the one we had previously? Not off the top of your head, you may not know, right?
That I don't know. I see Taylor giving it's higher, potentially Taylor. Yeah, I think it's higher. I'm not sure. Maybe 60-ish, if I remember correctly, 50, 60.
Good.
So
good.
Definitely
Great.
higher.
Well, thank you. Other questions for Ann Nelson? Thank you, Emma.
Oop, Chris, you're muted now.
If not, we'll move back to Charlie. And
Thank you.
please, let's defer to 8D when you get there to find out more about the communications union.
Okay, no
Thank you.
problem. So first thing, just to let you know, and Emma will have to add a little detail here, but this is a time of year where we send requests to half the municipalities to make appointments to the board. So everybody's on 2-year terms, but they're the first half of the alphabet's on 1 year, and the second half of the alphabet's on the second year. And Emma, any more detail you want to add about that?
That pretty much covers it. I think so. All those emails went out today. So a number of you would have received those. I see Bard nodding. So I guess, you know, the appointments are due May 31st. So we have a little bit of time. So I've received, you know, confirmations from a number of folks saying they'll get this on the select board agenda. So yeah, just stay tuned at this point, but that's just letting everyone know that that's underway.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Thank you for doing that. Staffing update. I'm sorry that I should probably find some better words than that to put on the agenda, because that looks like a scary term. But just to let you know, I guess I really wanted to let you know that Pam Brangan has announced to us all that she's going to be retiring at the end of June.
Recording stopped.
Uh-oh. Emma, the recording stopped. We went past our time limit, I guess. So anyway, just to let you know, if you see Pam, I just wanted you to be aware, and I'm sure we will have some recognition of that at our annual meeting in June. But and she's been with us over 25 years now. So back to that staff retention that Jeff mentioned. So that was the staffing update. Legislative update. I have definitely been spending more time there than I ever anticipated, I think. It was nice to see Elaine down there today. But as you know, was spending a lot of time last summer on a study for Act 250. Thanks, Elaine. Act 250 reform, and including some regional planning provisions and updates, and the designation program, and how all those three things connect. The governor just had a press conference midday today, again, trying to get more things to happen for housing. I actually just got a note from the Commissioner of Housing noting that he was pleasantly surprised with what the Senate Natural Resources Committee just voted out today at about 4:30. That bill, so it's House Bill 687, has been going through a lot of changes over the last couple of weeks. And VLCT also has some concerns about some municipal zoning provisions that went out in an email today. If any of you have conversations with your town planner or have some concerns, if you could let me know about them. I think we have probably another few days, I'm going to say another week, to maybe get some clarifications or edits into that bill. But it's almost a 200-page bill at this point. It covers Act 250 exemptions in, I'll call it our urban centers and village centers areas. And it's got exemptions there, and it's talking about some other there was a quid pro quo type of conversation going on about exemptions in the places we want to have growth, and with some more environmental protection in critical resource areas. But there's also a long several-year process for all this to actually get implemented. There's rulemaking in a variety of areas. So sorry, I'm way too down in the weeds of this. I'm gonna stop, pull myself back, and just let you know it's both an Act 250 bill, reform bill, and a housing bill. There's also funding programs and other things that came out of Senate Economic Development and Housing Committee. And so anyway, there's a lot there. There's also any questions on the Act 250 bill? Because sorry, that's just been a big one. on my plate. Any, again, if you do hear concerns from your select board, planning commission, planner, please let me know. I'm probably in a place where I might be able to get some adjustments to happen. Okay, nobody's hearing any concerns yet. That's good. The other couple legislative things, the open meeting law passed out of the Senate. It's in House GovOps now. I don't think we'll be able to meet like this. Well, I guess maybe we can meet like this, as long as Taylor's in our conference room, kind of providing the opportunity for somebody to walk in. I think we're probably going to have hybrid meetings starting July 1. I'm hoping, although I'm not sure where House Gov Ops Committee is right now, that they will allow advisory committees to remain 100% virtual. And this applies not just to us, obviously, but also to the municipalities. That was the last place that was in. But again, let me know if you have thoughts on that you want to get injected into the conversation. But they've been doing these interim virtual meeting laws right since the beginning of COVID, right? So they're now trying to get to what's the permanent situation that we should be in. I'm going to end my legislative update there. And any questions or any other bills people want to bring up that we should pay more attention to? Not seeing anybody raise their hand. Then other, Chris, CUD, Communications Union District.
And if any of our members can chime in, they'd mentioned that they've been challenging and this may not happen. So I wanted to get an update.
Yeah, Brad, thanks for unmuting. You want to take it, Brad?
If you want, yeah, I'll just keep it brief because it's so for those of you that don't know, the Chittenden County Communication Union District is made up of, I just pulled up the map, so I want to include everybody, but it's Westford, Underhill, Essex, Jericho, Essex Junction City, South Burlington, Williston, and Shelburne. So those communities make up the Chittenden County Consolidated Union District. Our union district is very different from the rest of the state. We have the fewest number of people that are underserved. And it's almost like our underserved are like planets on a solar system, in a solar system. They're all over the place, very far reaching, what are called long drops. So they're very challenging customers to provide service to. We hired a consulting firm called Mission Broadband out of Maine. Excellent people. And their job was to put an RFP together so we could solicit bids for internet service providers. We received only 2 bids. And unfortunately, I'll just back up just a second. Our CUD is very different in another way. Most of the CUDs throughout the state are actually owning the infrastructure. So they're building out these networks, owning the infrastructure and carrying on basically in perpetuity. The consensus of our group is that we didn't want to own IMNI infrastructure. We basically wanted to try to be a pass-through, receive the ARPA funds, which are in the range of 2.2 million, to just a pass-through so we can get as many people, the ultimate goal is universal service. So to provide universal service to our CUD, versus some of these other CUDs where the infrastructure is completely owned by them. So because we're so far reaching and like these planets in the solar system, these underserved people, the prices that we got, the 2 bids that we received were a lot more money than what the grant funds could provide. And it also comes with some, not to get in too much into the weeds, but some of the proposals did not provide universal service. So these funds were allocated by the legislature and set aside by the legislature to provide universal service. And because the person or the company that we're contracting with cannot guarantee universal service, it's kind of looking like we may not be able to accomplish that goal. I don't know if that's fair to say, Charlie, but unfortunately, and I think this is the harsh reality throughout the whole state, I think a lot of these CUDs are now realizing that this is a larger undertaking than they even imagined. I see kind of a financial crisis happening. Basically, if these CUDs that own these infrastructures cannot sustain themselves, they will be forced to relinquish their assets to the state, which is too bad, because I think the spirit of the whole project was to provide competition. So, you know, in hopes of small internet providers being able to provide, you know, competition against the big consolidated communication and Xfinity and alike. But unfortunately, the harsh reality is that this is a lot more expensive than anybody thought it was going to be.
Good.
So I think I just think that we have an incredible board of people and with a vast knowledge in the telecom world. I'm very pleased with Mission Broadband, who we've hired, and we're doing our best to make the right decisions. So stay tuned. I'd be glad to be more prepared and give a presentation.
No, you gave us the thumbnail sketch, and I appreciate your efforts on this, Brad. It sounds like you're doing a very comprehensive approach to it, and that, as we find out, the last mile may be the lost mile because of the difficulties involved and the expense involved in trying to provide coverage for people who want to live on a mountaintop. I'm reminded of our electricity finally getting wired here in Vermont. What was it, 1947? We got, no, later than that? Okay. Oh dear. Well, I hope it wasn't after I was born. But thank you for the update, Brad. Appreciate it. And Charlie, thank you for giving us time on that.
Yeah, Chris, I've got one more thing under D, which is just heads up to the Board Development Committee. Catherine, you're the chair. I'm going to be asking that committee to meet. We have to get certainly the nominating portion for FY24 executive committee members and officers to the board for the next meeting. So we'll need to meet sometime in the next few weeks. Heads up.
Great, thank you. So item 9, you will find 5 committee reports in your packet. And other than that, we'll move on to item 10, adjournment. I would need a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Garrett, and a second. Thank you, Benjamin.
Before you vote, I just want to note on your calendars, annual meeting is Tuesday, June 18th, so that we're not conflicting with Juneteenth. So it's on the next page of the agenda. So please mark that on your calendars, please.
I'm going to run right to my calendar as soon as we vote. So all those in favor, please hit the leave button or say aye. And anyone opposed, abstaining, please type in chat. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.